Hey, what's going on everyone? With the recent releases of Shadow of the Colossus and Crash Bandicoot Remix, I feel like this is an important moment for the industry, or just for games in general. More so in regards to Shadow of the Colossus, which from a graphical improvement over the original, has, I feel, set the standards for what we should, or perhaps more accurately, what we would like to see from other remakes of similar legendary status. There is no denying that Shadow of the Colossus on the PlayStation 4 looks absolutely stunning. We've all been in this territory before, where we would kill for remakes of this graphical caliber for many of the games we personally consider as classics. Sometimes the want for a remake, even goes far beyond the want for another new entry in the same series. As an example, if someone asked me today if I wanted a remake of The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening with a stunning 2D top-down art style, similar to say what you see on the screen now, or would I prefer a brand new top-down Zelda? I'm not going to lie, I would probably prefer the remake first over the new game. This, of course, is purely based off my previous knowledge, experience and nostalgia for Link's Awakening on the original Game Boy, so I feel more confident that I'll most likely be more content with the game, knowing that there is very little chance of Nintendo messing up, unlike Square as an example with this game.
Will come out no more. What? Huh? What'll come out no more? Come on! Damn it!
Now, we've had some high quality remakes in the past, some of which borderline on reimaginings, with the likes of Resident Evil Remake on the Nintendo GameCube, a game which for me is one of, if not arguably, the best Resident Evil games. Although I also consider Resident Evil 4 to be god tier as well. Absolutely love Resident Evil 4. We've had the awesomeness that is the Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, which for me is the second best Metal Gear game after Snake Eater. Epic. We've had Metroid Zero Mission and most recently Metroid Samus Returns, both remakes that could arguably be labelled as reimaginings of the original more than remakes, but still, fantastic remakes regardless. I list these games because they all have one thing in common. Although they are all remakes slash reimaginings, none of them remain exactly faithful to the originals in both art style and, more importantly, gameplay mechanics. But in regards to Shadow of the Colossus and Crash Bandicoot, one thing that has not changed are the gameplay mechanics. In fact, these two remakes play virtually identical to how they played when they first released. After watching many videos, reading reviews and chatting with people through social network, you see very few people complaining about the graphical improvements, because outside of personal preference, these games look fantastic. But in regards to the gameplay mechanics, this has seemingly split the crowd, and it's this I'd like to focus on in this discussion. In our wants for our classic games to be remade with vastly better graphics, should we or do we want their mechanics to remain the same as they were when they first released, or be updated to reflect the modern era? Something that, just like the graphical change, can greatly affect what we class as a remake or a reimagining. Whereas the games I mentioned earlier, like Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes and Resident Evil Remake, etc., they've had their mechanics changed slightly and updated slightly for the era that those remakes came out in. So, let me put my thoughts on this, and of course I want to really know yours afterwards. I feel like we've entered a somewhat unique moment in time where video game remakes are concerned. Both Shadow of the Colossus and Crash Bandicoot have done exceptionally well at retail, showing that the wants of remakes of such caliber is high, even with them remaining virtually completely faithful gameplay-wise to their originals. There are a few things to take away from this, I feel. One important thing being the preservation of the past. You see it, of course, in many other industries like in films, books and music. Most of our old VHS films, if you had VHS of course, have been brought to DVD and then later to Blu-ray. Nothing changing except perhaps adding a few deleted scenes, but with each update the original is cleaned up for modern viewing on modern TVs. Books and music get similar treatments with new artwork on the covers, cleaned up audio and text, etc., but the music and stories essentially remain identical to their originals. The original history preserved, but slightly updated for the modern era in terms of presentation. This is for many vitally important, of course. Many of us feel the same way about the original Star Wars films after Lucas added many additional scenes and changed some of the musical score. Although the original was there for the most part, some things got changed to the point where it straddles the line of a reimagining, leaving many begging for the originals to be updated with no changes other than cleaning up a few things up for modern viewing equipment.
No.
Now, I guess with classic video games, we have to ask ourselves, do we want to play, for example, PlayStation 4 looking games that control like PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2 games as an example? This begins to raise more questions, I guess, as in how good did those games control in the first place? In regards to Shadow and Crash, I feel that both had issues with their controls to begin with. Not to the point where they were unplayable, of course, but certainly might have left you wishing for better controls at the time. These controls can be affected by many things, whether the game was originally built with the digital or analog controls, how the characters were animated, the tech back then, etc. There were some games that control and animation wise still hold up greatly today. Take Super Mario 64 as an example. If a full-on Super Mario 64 remake was ever done, not counting the DS version, would you want the original sublime controls of the N64 game, or the even more, in my opinion, sublime controls of Super Mario Odyssey applied to it? The line between these two games control-wise is so close. I feel that even if the original controls were maintained and the rest of the game was given a Mario Odyssey graphical quality update, this remake would still play exceptionally well. But if we get a Metroid Prime Trilogy remake, as an example, now I had no issues with the game controls, but then we got the Wiimote control updates. You have to ask yourself, if these games came back looking absolutely stunning, Shadow of the Colossus level stunning, would you want them to retain their GameCube controls? This leads into the discussion on what would be preserved in a remake, I suppose. I've given this a lot of thought, and I feel that both Shadow of the Colossus and Crash Bandicoot, for me, have got it right for the most part. Solely in regards to purity of remakes. Not reimaginings or HD updates / remasters, but remakes, and most importantly preserving that history. I think it's vitally important to remember that what made these games what they are, controls and all. If all developers want to stray past these things, these older controls, etc., then I'd prefer reimaginings like Resident Evil Remake, Twin Snakes, Samus Returns, etc. But once you stray past the originals too far, yourself and many others will, in a sense, be playing a different game, not what is in essence the original game that remains famous. I use the Final Fantasy VII reimagining as an example here. The Final Fantasy VII you see here is going to be a completely different game to what we played before. Unless, of course, since the last trailer of the game has had a massive overhaul to better represent the art style, etc. of the original. Something I very much doubt. Anyone who hasn't played Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1, before, and plays this new game first, will not be playing the Final Fantasy that made the game famous in the first place. I feel it's as simple as that. Sure, the plot, the world and characters will be similar, but even those and everything else will be different, and in many ways drastically different to the original. Personally, for me, this is a reimagining, not a remake of the original. that's not to say the game won't be good. Time will tell, of course. And although I have no idea how the game will work, as because now it is episodic, but for me this isn't the Final Fantasy I know and fell in love with from the PlayStation 1. This is a complete reimagining. So for me, what would I prefer for a Final Fantasy 7 remake? I prefer the exact same camera angles, the exact same dialogue and everything that made the original that it was, but greatly spruced up to modern standards in terms of graphical quality. And I'm talking about looking at what they're doing with Project Octopath, for example. So to wrap this up, this is how I see things now. In an era where we are playing ports, HD updates, straight HD updates, reimaginings and remakes of classic games, I feel that Shadow of the Colossus and even Crash Bandicoot have created a new level of remakes of older games that have acquired those legendary status before, being brought back into the modern era with beautiful new graphics, yet retaining virtually everything else from their original outings that made them what they were. These are what I'll call for now HD remakes. Nothing too original there, but maybe if someone else comes up with something better, trademark it and let me know. All those HD ports we've had that literally just upscale older games for modern TVs. Games like, for example, Beyond Good and Evil, as you can see here. The way we've had these HD updates. For me, I don't want those anymore. At least not for certain games. I want the Shadow of the Colossus HD remakes. Those games, exactly how they were, but truly pimped out for the modern era. The sales of Shadow of the Colossus and Crash Bandicoot, have shown me that this is what people really want. I feel really want for HD remakes. Anyway, I'm really interested in all your thoughts on this one. I think it's a new important part of preserving video game history. As has come along here. Of course, I'm more than happy to still get reimaginings like Resident Evil remakes, like the Twin Snakes, and even at the odd pure HD updates for some games that don't warrant such great grand graphical updates like Shadow of the Colossus and Crash Bandicoot, I suppose. But for me, man, more HD remakes, please, and Square, to help repair the damage you have done to the Secret of Mana remake that you just threw out there. I'd happily take a Final Fantasy VI that looks like Octopath Traveler, please. Anyway, thanks for listening all. I know this video and some of the terminology in terms of remakes and reimaginings could probably bring up a different discussion about what we class as remakes and reimaginings, etc. But either way, in terms of what we're seeing here now with Shadow of the Colossus and stuff like that, I'm really looking forward to hearing your comments below. And as always, thanks for listening. Peace.